is a lawful stop? Am I being detained? Are you detaining me? Are you detaining me? Is that hard to understand? Because you know this is not legal.
Welcome back to Rights Watch, where we take a look at interactions between police and everyday people to see who's right, who's wrong, and whose side the law is actually on when it comes to exercising your rights if you ever find yourself in a similar situation. Today's video features an interaction between a law enforcement officer and a man who he has apparently pulled over. Let's jump into it. So the first thing that I notice here is that this law enforcement officer does not appear to be a police officer in any sort of marked car. So that's kind of the first interesting thing that I see in this interaction.
So I'm on the side of the highway about 300 yards from Georgia. This guy right here was in the left lane going about 40 miles an hour, and I'm trying to go around him. He pulls his badge out, points me to get over in this lane. He's been 5 miles in the left lane and will not get over. And he jumps out, says, "I'm a police officer, give me your license." He shows me a badge that says he's a probation officer. And I called 911, and now they're sending a North Carolina state trooper out to the scene.
So he's filming.
So he's going to start filming us now because he's got all butt hurt.
Okay, so it appears that not only did this law enforcement officer, and I'm using that term very specifically here, not have flashing lights, not have any of the indications that would typically indicate that somebody would need to pull over, which to me would indicate that I do not need to pull over. And if you ever have a question about whether or not someone has the authority to pull you over, the best thing that you can do is call the local police department or the 911 dispatch and ask if there's somebody in the area that can come assist, which is what this person appears to have done. Now, this begs the question, can a probation officer pull someone over? And although in some states, like Nevada, probation officers and police officers are classified the same way, in most cases, the answer is no, unless you are on parole or probation. If you are on parole or probation and a parole officer or probation officer tells you to pull over, you need to do so in most cases. In North Carolina, where it appears this interaction is taking place, PPOs can only arrest parolees, so that'd be a probation or parole officer, and are not classed as full peace officers, which would be a law enforcement officer, what we would typically consider to be a police officer. Additionally, even if he was within his authority in North Carolina to pull someone over for whatever he thinks this traffic infraction was, he would likely not be within his jurisdiction, and or the practice would be frowned upon by police officers whose job it is to do this, because any evidence that this guy has of speeding or whatever is likely not admissible in court, which means this is a waste of everybody's time.
Sir, you can film me all day long. If you're a police officer, you should have a body camera. Because you're not a police officer. It says right there you're a probation officer. I'm not on probation. I've never been in trouble for anything.
In the state of Alabama,
Tell my camera again how you're a police officer.
will you answer my question? I've answered yours. Now, let me ask you a question. In the state of Alabama, what are your probation officers considered to be?
I have no idea. We're not in Alabama.
Okay. Do you live in Alabama? Because your tag says you're in
I guess when a police officer gets here, we'll determine a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, okay.
How often do you pull someone over?
How often? I pull people.
So the irony here is this quote-unquote officer is asking how police officers and parole officers are classified in the state of Alabama, where they are not, and he is not a parole officer, or he is not a police officer or a parole officer in the state of Alabama. He is a parole officer in the state of North Carolina, and he doesn't know his own laws.
How often do you drive in the left lane for 5 miles going 48 miles an hour?
I wasn't doing 48 miles an hour, sir.
So how fast were you going?
I was doing 55.
And what happened?
You come flying up on
No,
my back
when I
end,
passed you, I was going
and then-
48
and
miles
then
an
you
hour.
were doing
But if your
exactly
car
what I
here, that's not a police car, had the radar in it, you would know how fast I was going.
Yes, sir. And I'm able to do speed estimations.
I'm sure you will be. I guess when your real police officer gets here, I'm sure I'm going to get some tickets.
All right. Well, you just stay tight. Just hang tight, okay?
What's your name? Would you like to identify yourself?
Have you going to give me your driver's license?
You're not a police officer.
Okay, then you just said tight.
So you're refusing to identify.
Okay, so it depends on the local laws here, but if this truly was a law enforcement officer and not whatever this probation officer claims that he is here, when you ask someone to identify, although most states do not have a law that requires that police officers identify, law enforcement officers by departmental policy are almost always required to identify to the public whether or not you have identified to them.
You're refusing to identify yourself.
Just sit tight.
You're refusing to identify yourself even though you pulled me over.
Sit tight.
No, this guy knows he's messed up, but his buddy here will bail him out with a whole bunch of tickets. Am I being detained? Am I being detained, sir?
So when you ask a police officer or any sort of law enforcement officer if you're being detained, they generally are required to tell you. However, the test that the Supreme Court has typically used is that if a reasonable person would feel that they are being detained. For me, I would not feel that I'm being detained in this situation. Obviously, the driver does, which is why he's asking for clarification. Any rational law enforcement officer, probation, parole, police should be educating you on whether you are or are not detained and the reason why you are being detained. Remember, the only time you can lawfully be detained is when there's reasonable suspicion that you specifically have, currently are, or are about to commit a crime. If this driver was speeding, a law enforcement officer who has the ability to actually do speed estimates, write tickets, all of those kinds of things, which, as we discussed previously, this probation parole officer does not, a police officer could pull this driver over, but a random person, which is essentially what this guy is for all intents and purposes in this interaction, this parole officer, probation officer is a rent-a-cop, right? He's a security guard. You can't just pull people over unless you have the authority to do so. In this case, this guy does not have the authority to pull this person over, much less to detain this person, unless, as we talked about earlier, he's on parole or probation.
I've got to go home. Are you detaining me? Are you detaining me? Am I being detained? Hey, I'm going to step out. Because Am I being detained because I need to be on my way? Is this a lawful stop? Am I being detained? Are you detaining me? Are you detaining me? Is that hard to understand? Because you know this is not legal. This is not legal. And you know this. Will you answer my question? Am I being detained? Am I being detained? No, you're not trying to. Am I being detained? Because you...
This is a very simple yes or no question. At this point, I don't understand what the problem is. If this officer does not give him a straight yes or no answer, and he doesn't feel like he's being detained, he's well within his rights to leave this interaction. Now, if he is being lawfully detained, and I'm sure this person in this interaction does not understand the intricacies of what probation and parole officers can and can't do in Murphy, North Carolina, if for some reason this guy does have the authority to pull him over and he leaves, that can lead to extra tickets, which is why he's asking the officer a simple yes or no question, which the officer refuses to answer.
You know the law on that. Am I being detained? Hey, I'm going to leave now because you won't tell me if I'm being detained or not. Am I being detained? Say it. Sir, am I being detained? Will you say those words? You can either, am I free to leave? Am I free to leave? So I am being detained. Why don't you answer that? You're not talking to anybody now.
If an officer indicates that you are not free to leave, that de facto means you are being detained, whether they tell you you are being detained or not. If you lose your freedom of movement, you have been detained. Whether you are in a car, whether you're walking down the street, he is now under a detainment. Since this officer claims he has the authority to pull people over, technically he could pull this driver over for speeding if he has that authority, which does not appear that he does under North Carolina law. But as discussed previously, there doesn't appear to be any indication that he's within his authority in any way. And in doing so, under the color of law, meaning he used his badge, he literally flashed his badge at this guy to get him to pull over, it could open him up to a variety of lawsuits, including federal civil rights lawsuits and potentially criminal charges for kidnapping or unlawful detention, unlawful detainment, as well as state charges for the same thing, because he has now told this person he is not free to leave and he's using his badge to do so, which could amount to kidnapping or unlawful detention.
How long can you keep me on the side of the road as a prisoner? Am I free to leave right now? Am I being detained? Why don't you say that? Am I being detained? What am I being detained for?
Well, if you paid attention to me and listened to me a few minutes ago, I was trying to explain all this to you, sir, but you did not wish to listen to me. You wanted to talk over me.
Am I being detained?
30 charges.
How long does a Terry stop last? Yes, I need to go home because we're on vacation. Am I free to leave? Am I being detained? Why won't you say those words? You know, you're well versed in the law. You are a law officer. You told me that. Am I being detained? It's a yes or no question.
I told you you're not free to leave yet.
So am I being detained?
I just answered that.
Why can't you say that? You're mincing words.
Sir, do me a favor and have a seat.
I will. Am I being detained? I'll get back in my car.
So at this point, the officer asked him to re-enter the car. And if this was a lawful stop, Pennsylvania versus Mims, which is a Supreme Court decision governing traffic stops when police can and cannot ask people to enter or leave a vehicle during a traffic stop, would apply here. And under the holdings of Pennsylvania versus Mims, essentially a police officer can ask you or any passengers in the car to remain in the vehicle or to leave the vehicle for any and all reasons that they have at any point during the interaction. So if this was a lawful stop, then the request of this officer for him to re-enter the vehicle would be a lawful request, but that is a big if for whether this probation officer has the ability to create this interaction to begin with.
Am I being detained? What's so hard to answer?
You're giving her a headache.
That's
You just
fine.
be quiet.
That's fine. You're just, why can't you answer my, you know you're in the wrong.
Your question, sir.
You know you're in the wrong. That's why you're sitting there with that fake smirk.
Just sit tight.
I want to go home.
You said, well,
How long is a Terry stop
I'm
last?
not going to take and allow you to take and endanger other people's lives on the road.
Am I free to go? Am I being detained? Those are yes or no questions. For how long? I'm going to go home now. I'm going home now.
So as we talked about previously, since it doesn't appear that this officer has any authority to create this interaction to begin with, the driver could leave at any point. But if he does, and this probation officer did have the legal authority to pull somebody over and is classed as a police officer, like he claimed, could lead to a variety of felonies, including evading, fleeing, some of those kinds of things that police like to tack on. So at this point, since he's not sure whether or not this probation officer is classed the same way as a police officer and has the ability to create this interaction, his best bet is to wait for a real police officer to show up.
Am I free to go? Am I being detained? So now he's going to get my tag number. How long does a Terry stop last, sir?
I'm not doing a Terry stop.
So what am I being detained for?
So he asked, how long does a Terry stop last? What he's talking about here is a stop under Terry v. Ohio. This officer says, I'm not doing a Terry stop. Any detention like this does need to have the elements that are found under Terry, which, as we've discussed previously in this video, would be that he has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime. That's the only time a police officer can ever stop you and demand identification or do anything like that, like this quote-unquote officer has done. Now, a police officer at any point while you're walking down the street can come up and ask you for an identification, but the only time, even in quote-unquote stop and ID states, that you can be required to present an identification or that a police officer can detain you while they're trying to ascertain your identification is when it meets the test under Terry v. Ohio, which is what the driver is referencing. This probation officer is, in fact, because he required an identification before he let this driver go, using a stop under the Terry v. Ohio holding.
Am I being detained? Am I being detained?
Aggressive driving is what you've done, sir.
Am I being detained? Are you making a citizen's arrest?
Sit tight, Moses. I'm not making no citizen's arrest.
Sir, you know you pulled me over 15 minutes now. How long is the Terry stop?
So there is no official time that the courts have recognized for how long a stop or a detention can last. The guidance from the courts traditionally is that it should last no longer than reasonable to complete the objective of the stop. Since they're waiting on a real police officer to show up, that officer hasn't showed up yet. If this was someone who had the authority to initiate the stop to begin with, then this would be a reasonable amount of time. However, since it doesn't appear that this officer has the ability to create a traffic stop to begin with, or he would have already written this driver a ticket, this is not a reasonable amount of time, at least in my opinion.
Can you call your supervisor?
So now the driver is asking for a supervisor, and as we've talked about multiple times on this channel, most states don't have a legal requirement that an officer of any sort calls a supervisor, and many departments don't even have a policy that requires it, although it's typically suggested. And the point of requesting a supervisor is that you ask for someone with more authority and more experience to come adjudicate the situation. Now, since he has already called 911, the driver has already called 911, and there's a actual police officer on the way, the probation officer calling his supervisor wouldn't really do anything in this situation anyway.
Call your supervisor, please, right now. Thank you. I don't see you making a move to call your supervisor.
I'm not calling my supervisor right now while I'm using this phone to film you.
So you can't call on the radio your supervisor? Sir, I may leave here with a couple of tickets, but you're going to leave with a bunch. Hey, you see that? If you're out here patrolling the highways,
Yeah, I got one person at a time that I can deal with, sir.
how fast was that car? You're an expert on speed. How fast was that car going?
What'd you tell me?
I don't have radar. I can't judge speed. Sir, I'm asking you again. Will you call your supervisor? I should leave now. It's over 10 minutes on this recording. I'm so nervous. I'm shaking so bad right now. So how long do we sit here?
This till the state trooper gets here.
Sir, will you call your supervisor? So how long am I being detained? That's not the way the law reads, and you know what a Terry stop is. A Terry stop is 15 minutes or less. Yes. So am I free to go? Am I free to go? I don't have to go to college to get a law degree to know the law.
It's one of the things police officers seem to say a lot when people exert their rights is, oh, where'd you go to law school? You don't have to go to law school to understand basic fundamental constitutional rights. And it's mind-boggling that many police officers don't either. Now, it is important to note some things like Terry versus Ohio and what this driver is actually references. And I think I misquoted this a minute ago. What he's really talking about here is Rodriguez versus the United States, which states the court reasoned that a stop may not be extended beyond the time necessary to complete the mission of the stop. Now, there's usually a mix between that and the case law under Terry that people try to say, oh, it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But both of those cases generally hold that it should be to complete the mission of the stop. Interestingly, Rodriguez versus the United States is also the same case law that is typically used for when you get pulled over for speeding or something like that, and the police officer decides 35 minutes into the traffic stop that they're going to call a drug dog because they claim they smell marijuana or something like that. That is actually prohibited under Rodriguez versus the United States.
15 minutes, Supreme Court ruling, Terry versus the state of Ohio. All right, how about that? Where'd you get your law degree?
Where did I get my law?
Yeah. Western Carolina University. I'm glad you have a law degree.
Yes, sir, I do.
So I have to have a law degree to know the law?
But you really want to take the quiz? I'm
No,
gonna quiz you.
all I want you to will you answer one question?
Sir, listen to me. Wait. Just calm down. Just calm down. One, if you'd relaxed and had a conversation with me here, we'd probably be both going about our ways of doing our jobs. You going home and me going to do my job. You understand what I'm trying to tell you?
I understand what you're trying to say.
The only thing I was doing was stopping you, getting you pulled over so one, you calm down and quit endangering other people's lives.
I wasn't endangering nobody's
Yes,
lives.
sir. Yes, sir.
We're in more danger when you got me pulled over right here than we were out here.
So, as we were just talking about Rodriguez versus the U.S., this officer just admitted that, let's take it with a grain of salt here for a minute, that he does have the authority to conduct this. He never had any intention of writing a ticket or citing the driver. He just wanted to make sure that nobody got hurt. And so, at this point, the mission of the stop, which is letting this driver know to slow down, has been completed. This officer knows he has no authority to conduct this stop, that he has no authority to write a speeding ticket, and if he did have the authority to pull this person over and he wasn't going to write him a ticket, then this stop should be over because the mission of the stop has been completed. That mission was to address the traffic violation that warranted the stop and attend to any safety-related concerns, basically letting the driver know to slow down. And once that is done, this stop is over under Rodriguez versus the United States.
You're going up and down this highway.
Possibility of truth.
So I'll tell you what I'll do.
No,
Since we're
no.
talking and being calm, will you answer one question for me, and I won't say another word to the state trooper. Am I being detained?
You have been stopped until I can get a trooper here to have a talk with you because you cannot talk to me.
Why is that not a yes or no question?
Well, because I've done answered that question. You asked me, are you being detained? I've said, you are been stopped.
But you won't say it.
So if someone is mincing words this way, it means that they know they don't have the authority to do what they're doing. If he doesn't just say, yes, you are being detained, then he knows he doesn't have the ability to detain him, but he wants the driver or the person that he's interacting with to feel like they are being detained, which a reasonable person would feel that they are being detained under this situation because someone flashes a badge and says, pull over. That makes you feel like you are being detained, which is the actual true test under Supreme Court precedent of whether or not you are being detained under the law.
Am I free to leave then? Since you won't answer
I've
that
already
one.
answered that question.
So you won't say if I'm being
I've
detained or not?
already answered that question, sir.
No, you hadn't, and you know
Yes,
it.
sir, I have.
As we just discussed, whether or not this officer wants him to leave, the mission of this traffic stop is over. He let him know that he was driving a little too fast and that he was worried about his speed and the safety of people around him. He specifically stated earlier that that was the mission of this stop if it was lawful to begin with, which again, under Rodriguez versus the U.S. would mean this interaction is over and this driver is free to leave.
You're not listening to me. You're too agitated. You're too.
Oh, I am agitated because a probation officer pulled me over for going 48 miles an hour because he was in the left lane for the last 5 miles and wouldn't get over.
You sit tight here, and we'll get to the bottom of it.
Here he is, good. So here's the state
You
trooper.
better calm down and fish
I am
some
going to calm
license
down.
out and
I've
some
got my license
insurance.
out.
This driver's wife just said, you're going to need to calm down and get everything out. There's no reason that you need to be calm in an interaction, right? There's no legal reason for it. However, if you are more calm in any interaction with a police officer, typically they will be more calm as well. So while it's good advice from the female passenger in this car, there's no legal obligation to do so. And in fact, if he wanted to sit there and swear at the police officer and express all of his frustration for how stupid this interaction is, he's well within his legal rights to do so.
Hey, sir.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good, good. Hey, look, I don't really fully understand what
Me either.
we're doing right here. Okay, so he just felt like you were aggressively coming up on him. He's a probation officer. Okay, so I'm not gonna write you for anything. I'm not doing anything like that. Okay, you got your insurance here.
I'm
sure
wound
your
up, and
licenses are good.
you're
I understand.
unwinding me. I appreciate that.
Okay, so where you headed to? You headed back home?
Home to Alabama.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So look, it's one of those things. Okay, you may have come up on him a little quick. He may have, it's one of them things. Okay, so as long as, I mean, like I said,
I'm good.
I don't
good
have
now. I'm
anything
calming
to
way
write you.
down.
I don't have anything to write you for. I don't have anything like that. I'm not going to do anything. Even if I'm not going to. It's not my fault. He just feels, he just felt like you come up on him a little hard. You might have been a little aggressive. So if that is the case, let's just back it down a little bit. You're nearly to Georgia anyway. So,
that's why I say I can.
what
I
I'm saying?
appreciate it.
All right. I mean, what do you do for a living?
Oh, we own a restaurant.
Restaurant. I got you. Okay. All right, sir. Well, I'm gonna let you carry on the way. Okay.
All right. Well, I appreciate it.
All right, sir.
Thank you.
It's amusing to me how this officer is probably more confused than the driver or we are watching this video as to why he has this interaction. And I guarantee you, as soon as he gets back in the car, he's radioing back to his station or calling one of his friends on the force and saying something to the effect of, "You'll never believe what just happened on my last stop. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen." If you thought this interaction was a bit crazy, you'll want to see this video where police immediately demand ID from a man speaking very calmly on the steps of City Hall.